So you know me, always with the extra safety. So I have my PFD on. I have an inflatable kayak with 3 air tubes, and then just to be on the safe side, I now have a life buoy. So in these very dangerous waters, I think I'm safe. So while I'm out here, I might as well talk a little bit about the kind of kayaking that I'm doing right now. I'm city hopping today from Stockholm to Köping in another county, and then to Örebro, yet in another county, and then again to Strängnäs in another county, and back to Stockholm County. So you could obviously do this by car if you had a sea kayak or a hardshell kayak or any kayak really, and you could go by car to each of these cities, and just like I did, just go ashore, just get to the water and start paddling, and then paddle back to your car. So that's possible even with a hardshell kayak. I think the advantage I see in having a portable kayak, like an inflatable kayak or a folding kayak, is that when I'm out in these cities or towns, given that my kayak is portable, I carry it in a backpack, I am able, first of all, to walk to a launch spot, not worrying about parking, which might otherwise be a significant limitation. I mean, over here maybe you might have parking right next to a good launch spot, or you might have to roll your kayak, even with a kayak trolley, for a long distance before you could actually get to the water, perhaps, in which case you're kind of trying to make your kayak portable anyway. But the major difference that I see with portable kayaks or packrafts or a stand-up paddleboard that is inflatable is that when I'm out in these cities and towns, I don't have to necessarily go back to the exact point where I started. I could start in one point in the city and then up in another. So I bring my kayak into the water in one spot, and then I paddle for a number of hours or whatever it is, and then I, instead of circling back to where I started, I paddle to another location, seeing more of these new areas and giving me more flexibility, because I could take a bus back, or maybe I could walk back with my backpack, something that would be tricky to do with a hardshell kayak, obviously. While walking back you could do, but you couldn't take the bus. So that's exactly what happened, for example, in Karlstad, where I was paddling back in the winter, just as winter started this season. Then basically when I arrived there in the dark, I got back to a different side of the city than I had started from. I started on the north side, on the river there, and then I actually ended my paddle on the south side and paddling into the city. So first of all, paddling there at night. Well, while I didn't find the north side of the center of the city paddling on the river particularly riveting, it was really interesting to paddle among the buildings at night with the light under this bridge and many other things. It was a great experience, but there turned out to be a lock. So I couldn't really get back to the north side where I had my launch spot, where I knew I could get back to land. So I was on the wrong side of the city. But with this portable kayak, that was not an issue. I just packed it down, cold as it was, dry suit and everything, and just walked a reasonably short distance to a nearby Chinese restaurant, had some food, and then went to the train station, but from the other side. If that had been a hardshell kayak, of course, in that case the distances were close enough that if I had had a kayak trolley, I could have rolled the kayak through the city to the other side. But in many cases, you know, that was just coincidence that it was that close. In many cases this is not really feasible. And the other thing is, sometimes I actually paddle more reasonably. I mean, right now I'm paddling in one city, taking the train to the next one, and then paddling there, and then paddling to the, you know, in a third city. That means I'm inflating my kayak and deflating my kayak twice today, or actually 3 times. But so that's an inconvenience. But oftentimes I don't do exactly that. The reason I'm doing that is simply because the distances are too large to paddle in one day. So that's why I'm train hopping like this. When I'm out here anyway, I figured, you know, I'm closer to these locations, why not get them paddled once I'm here? But I also paddle between cities. So the last time I was in these parts, I was south of here in Kungsör, which I paddled to from Arboga. And that's where I came across the Hjälmare Canal, the canal there that's Sweden's oldest functioning canal, that goes all the way down to Lake Hjälmaren, where I might be paddling today. So in that case, I actually came from Eskilstuna, another city where I had paddled the day before. And then I took the train to Arboga, and from Arboga I paddled to Kungsör after some paddling on that canal there. And that, of course, wouldn't work with a car unless I kind of locked my kayak somewhere, took the train back to the other city where I had a car, and then drove back to hopefully have my kayak intact. That would work, it could be done, but it's just not as flexible. Then we had a recent very bumpy paddle between this Vadstena and Motala. Escalated fairly quickly, and it can still escalate further equally quickly. Now it's bouncy, but add a bit of volume to this and these will be some waves, you know. That was the hugely choppy one in this actual kayak. I paddled from Vadstena to Motala, and then I actually paddled on Göta Canal, a famous canal there, to Borenshult further down, and I took the bus back to the center of that town. And none of that would really have made as much sense with a car, you know. It would have been possible, but as a solo paddler it would have been, you know, a lot more difficult and taken a lot more time to go back to another city, pick up a car, then drive back to the city where I came from, and so on and so forth. So having a portable kayak like this does afford a lot of flexibility. It does allow for a lot of options, really, to make different choices while you're out on the water. If you have different routes that you could take, then as long as you know that you could get back by bus or train and whatnot, you can decide to change your paddle route or your paddle plan during the day itself, which is great. And if I'm paddling in a big city like Stockholm, where I'm normally based, then you know, there are buses or trains or trams or metro everywhere, or in so many places at least, that I have so many options. This is of course very different depending on where you live, but in a capital city like Stockholm, where public transport is really readily available, it is really convenient. But there are even locations there, such as here, where I had to take a ferry back in the archipelago after a relatively long paddle just to catch the last evening bus, because there weren't connections available that late in the evening or even early in the morning to start my paddle. So you adapt with what you have, but if you plan well and you know the times, you know the available transport times, so you've double checked that and checked for any abnormalities on the date that you're going to paddle, you can really make use of available transport and create some really interesting paddle routes if you have a portable kayak. Of course, I have some lighter ones as well. But even with a heavier kayak like the Air Fusion Evo from Advanced Elements, or the 286 500, which I paddle a lot, it's possible to bring your backpack around. It's just that you need to put in a lot of work in first carrying that kayak to the location if it's far away from train or wherever you're traveling, and then of course you have to inflate your kayak, set up the kayak properly, and after the paddle you have to pack it down again, dry it off quickly. And so yeah, I would say the further the distance is that I might have to walk during the day with a kayak and a backpack, or sometimes, you know, you could use a trolley actually and roll this thing around, then it's not that bad. But the further that distance is, the heavier it is. I don't usually mind that much because I see it as part of the exercise. When you have a calm paddling trip, like right now, it's not like I'm exactly spending a huge amount of energy here, I'm just relaxing on the water, then I see the carrying around kayak and gear part as, you know, just additional exercise. The same amount of effort could be spent at the gym and cost a lot more. Then why not use the timer on the water to get that exercise in? That's how I think about it. The other inconvenience is of course that you have to make sure that your kayak is reasonably dry and clean once you get back. First a cursory quick clean up and drying off the kayak as you get to land and pack it up, and then when you get home you might want to really make sure that it's dry, unless you're heading back out quite soon again. So there are some logistics involved, but to some extent the same thing goes for a hardshell kayak. So with a hardshell kayak, usually, not always, but oftentimes that kayak will be heavier. So even if you're just getting it onto the rooftop of your car and down from your car to the water, it's still sometimes heavy work, especially if you're a solo paddler. Then you still have to dry off and clean that kayak somewhat, at least, even if it has less requirements than an inflatable kayak, for example. So it's not without the logistics there either. And in both cases, obviously, you'll want to dry and clean your gear. I'll definitely want to clean this kayak a bit after paddling in this dirty water. But all in all, I mean, whatever kayak you use offers different possibilities. And this style of paddling that not everyone is into can be quite rewarding still. I enjoy it because for me, paddling from the beginning has been about exploration, seeing new places and experiencing things in a new way. And if I can do it in my own way, like I do with these kayaks, I can set set my own rules, so to speak, for how I explore the waterways. That is a freedom that is quite valuable, actually. And a portable kayak like this does offer extra freedom. The limitation compared to a hardshell kayak is that typically the lighter the kayak is, the slower it is, and it's in most cases slower than a hardshell kayak. So you might not paddle quite as far unless you spend extra energy as you would with a hardshell equivalent kayak. But on the other hand, you have that extra flexibility. And of course, when you get home, if you don't have a lot of space to actually store a kayak, not everybody has the place for a long sea kayak or hardshell kayak, then having a portable kayak that folds up into a backpack can of course have significant storage advantages. I mean, I have quite a fleet of kayaks actually. In most of the cases they are inflatable, and if those were hardshell kayaks, they would be taking up a huge amount of space, whereas now, well, they do take up space for sure, but not as anywhere near as much. So yeah, those are some thoughts on portable kayaking. And when everything works nicely, you know, your kayak sets up okay and you don't really have troubles on the road and the trains work. Today there was a minor delay waiting in one spot for a train that would meet us, but you know, generally the train was on schedule. I took a commuter train also today just to get to the regional train station. You know, things worked out nicely and the setup here was easy and the weather is fantastic. So when you have those conditions and you're just out enjoying a day paddling, then portable kayaking like this can be really, really nice. So, well, those are my thoughts. Do you do portable kayaking, or do you travel with a hardshell kayak, or with a stand-up paddleboard or a packraft? Let me know your experience and your thoughts on this. Pros and cons, and where you run into trouble, and what you actually find works really nicely. And now I'm gonna check to see if I can pack up my kayak so I can get an early lunch and then back to the train station, because I have a train to catch to the next city, Örebro, so I don't want to miss that. So that's me signing off for now. Thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and see you in the next one or in the comment section.